Hello friends, I'm George, the nice smelling gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. Summertime is fast approaching and that means that we need to get ready with our summertime fragrances. So today's video is going to be just about that. Today I've prepared a list of 20 fragrances that have two things in common. The first thing is that they work great in the warmest months of the year, and the second thing is that all of them are budget-friendly options. I'm going to start with three fragrances that are cloning or have been heavily inspired by Armani fragrances. The first one comes from the house of Perry Ellis and it's called 360 Red. This fragrance, some people say it's a clone, some people say it's a heavily inspired by, but the fragrance that this is super close to is Armani's Aqua di Gio, the original Aqua di Gio. It's a very classy, summertime fragrance, very easy to wear, a very recognizable DNA that's super versatile, has a bit of an age factor, at this point, but I still think that to this day this fragrance just works, that DNA just works. It's easy to wear in warm, in the warmest months of the year. It gets compliments when it comes to 360 Red particularly. At least my bottle has been a pretty good performer as well. The second one that I'm going to show today comes from the house of Maison Alhambra and it's called Jorge di Profumo. This one is a clone of Armani's Aqua di Gio Profumo. It's pretty nicely done, has nice quality. The difference here compared to the previous fragrance that I showed you that is cloning the original Aqua di Gio is that with Profumo, with the original fragrance and the clone in here, you get introduced to a bit of a darkness. It doesn't feel as light as the the original fragrance, as the original Aqua di Gio. This has quite a strong incensey vibe, a smoky vibe that adds a bit of darkness and let's call it, makes this fragrance a little bit more interesting, puts a nice twist on the original DNA. Performance here is pretty decent on the clone, I mean, scent-wise pretty close to the original fragrance, and the best thing out of all is that this fragrance is pretty cheap. The next one that I'm going to show you comes from the house of Lattafa and it's called Liam or Liam Blue, and this one is a clone of Aqua di Gio Profondo, which stands somewhere in the middle between the original Aqua di Gio and Aqua di Gio Profumo. It's a little bit darker compared to the original Aqua di Gio, but not as dark and not as incensey as the Profumo flanker. Still though, this is a very likable scent profile, very easy to wear, especially in the warmer months. It gets compliments, it's pretty versatile, and the good thing here is that it's very cheap, especially compared to the original fragrance, quite a lot cheaper. And the other thing is that this actually, in my experience, has even better performance than the original fragrance, especially the projection. All in all, this is a very nice alternative for Aqua di Gio Profondo. The next one that I'm going to show you again comes from the house of Maison Alhambra and it's called Porto Neroli, and this fragrance is a clone of Neroli Portofino from Tom Ford. You get a pretty similar scent profile to the original fragrance, strong on the Neroli, clean smelling Neroli note. There's some added freshness, there's some spiciness in here. It's a very clean smelling scent that in my opinion works great, especially in the hottest months of the year. I've always imagined a guy wearing a white linen shirt, drinking coffee or maybe like a light cocktail next to the beach. That's what I imagine when I smell a Porto Neroli and the original fragrance from Tom Ford. Pretty decent clone of the original fragrance, has pretty decent performance, especially considering the lightness of the scent profile in here. The next fragrance that I'm going to show you comes again from the house of Maison Alhambra, and this one is called Dark Door Sport. And probably by looking at the bottle you already know what this is cloning. This is a clone of Dior Homme Sport. It's pretty nicely done. I still haven't done a full review of this fragrance, but scent-wise this is quite close to the original fragrance. In my opinion there are a few slight differences, but the scent profile in here is all about the mix of citruses, some woods, a touch of spiciness and quite a lot of musk. And the way that this differs, at least so far in my experience, compared to the original, is by the added sort of stronger musky note in this fragrance. But other than that, it's quite close. It's another super versatile fragrance that can be pretty much can be worn all year round. So far performance seems to be pretty decent, but again, I think the best time to wear this fragrance is throughout the warmest months of the year. The next fragrance featured in today's video comes from the house of Rasasi, and it's called Fatan, and this one is cloning Terre, and actually it's probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous clone of Terre. It has very similar scent to the original fragrance. You get the citruses, you get the ouds, you get the spiciness, you get that sort of an earthy vetiver that you get out of the original fragrance. Maybe Fatan feels even a little bit more spicy, a little bit sharper compared to the original fragrance, but other than that, it's quite close scent-wise. Quite close when it comes to performance as well. It's a pretty decent performer considering that this is a fresh type of scent. Has a bit of a mature factor. You have to keep that in mind, but other than that, this is a very nicely done fragrance. The previous one that I showed you came from the house of Rasasi, and the next one again will come from the house of Rasasi, and this one is called Hawas, the famous Hawas, probably the most famous fragrance from the house of Rasasi. It's a great summertime fragrance that's super close to you know, what's this at this point has been a discontinued scent from the house of Paco Rabanne called Invictus Aqua. Although from what I've seen lately, Paco Rabanne have seemed to release a sort of a limited, edition version of Invictus Aqua, but still this one is a great scent that's super close to the fragrance from Paco Rabanne. I think this actually came even before Invictus Aqua, so this cannot be called a clone. It's very fruity, it's very fresh, quite sweet, quite youthful, has a nice sort of a marine aquatic saltiness to it, fantastic scent profile, fantastic performer, compliment getter, super versatile fragrance that only has one cone, and that's that. Nowadays this can hardly be called a cheapie actually, unfortunately, because prices have skyrocketed, at least in my country around here. This nowadays costs about 65 to 70 euros, which puts it almost into a designer level pricing, but I cannot deny the fact that this fragrance is very nice and just works. The next one that I'm going to show you is pretty similar to Hawas that I just showed you. It comes from the house of Lattafa, and it's called Hayati. This one though is not a clone of Invictus Aqua. This is more a clone of Invictus, but still works a great, in the summertime. It's pretty similar to Hawas, but you don't get that aquatic saltiness that you get out of Rasasi Hawas. This feels a little bit more bubblegummy, a little bit sweeter, less fresh. Still though, a great fragrance on its own. If you cannot get Hayati Black, you can go for Lattafa Najdia, which is pretty similar to Hayati. Both of them, scent-wise are pretty close to each other, although in my experience, in my opinion, Hayati is slightly better. I prefer this scent-wise a little bit more over Najdia, and I prefer this when it comes to performance, because this definitely, in my experience, has been beating comfortably Najdia when it comes to performance. And the third one that carries a pretty similar vibe, a pretty similar scent profile that I'm going to show you in this video comes from the house of Fragrance World and Atour Al Alam, and it's called Qa'ed. I just did a review of this fragrance yesterday, and this is a very interesting mix that carries a few different DNAs. It's pretty similar to Paco Rabanne's Invictus. It's also somewhat similar to Rasasi Hawas, because it has a bit of those aquatic marine saltiness that you get out of Hawas, but also has quite a lot of sweetness and almost comes across a bubblegummy, and at least in my opinion, this reminds me a little bit of Jean Paul Gaultier's Ultramol as well. A very nice, likable, fresh, fruity type of scent that has very decent performance. Again, a very high compliment factor, super versatile, very youthful scent. All in all, has been a great discovery for me. The next one that I'm going to show comes from the house of Art Al Zafran, and it's called Al Dirham Limited Edition. And this one is a fragrance that's heavily inspired by Chanel's Allure Homme Sport. Pretty close to the original fragrance, although this feels a little bit, not a little bit, but quite a bit sweeter compared to the original. Still, you get quite a lot of freshness. That's enough to work in the hottest months of the year. You get some spiciness, but quite a lot of sweetness as well. It has tonka bean, a bit of powderness, and quite a lot of vanilla. A very loud fragrance that beats the original scent, no problem. When it comes to performance, it's pretty cheap, comes nicely packaged, and it's very likable, and it has a high compliment factor. Smells a tad bit synthetic, especially up close, but at that price point I cannot complain about this fragrance. The next one that I'm going to show you comes from the house of Raiee Broca, which is a sub-brand of Afnan for those who don't know, and it's called Nexa Immortal. And this one is a very sort of a decent alternative, or you can call it also a clone of Parfums de Marly's Greenly. It's fruity, it's sweet, it's slightly spicy, slightly green, you know, a bit woody. There's also sort of an oak moss note or vibe in this fragrance as well. It's likable, easy to wear, has pretty decent performance, you know, slightly above average in my experience. All in all, will get you decently close to Greenly. Nowadays, I don't think there are that many clones of Greenly, so you don't have too many options. And if you like the original DNA and you want something very cheap to daily drive carrying that DNA, you can check out Nexa Immortal from Raiee Broca. The next one that I'm going to show you is another Parfums de Marly's clone, but this one is a clone of Parfums de Marly's Sedley. It comes from the house of Lattafa and it's called Mahir Legacy. It comes in this very unique looking bottle that weighs around about 10 kilos, and you can use this fragrance as a weapon. It looks like a, you know, almost like a baseball bat. You know, with jokes aside, this actually was a pretty pleasant surprise when it comes to the actual fragrance. Scent-wise, pretty close to the original fragrance. It's sweet, it's fruity, it's minty. You get some woods, you get some spiciness. It's actually turned out to be a very, very easy to wear fragrance with surprisingly good performance for a freshie, especially the projection. At least my bottle seems to project really, really nicely. Price tag is usually pretty low. It has a unique looking bottle that will stand out in anybody's collection. All in all, a very, very good alternative to Sedley. The next one that I'm going to show you comes from the house of Hamidi, which is a sub-brand of Armaf, if you didn't know that, and it's called Hamidi Addicted Imperial, and this is a clone of Tom Ford's Millésime Imperial. It's nicely done. You get a very similar scent profile that's fruity. You get a nice melon note in here with some aquatic notes, aquatic saltiness, you know, some musks on the dry down, some woods, a very you know, interesting scent that can be a bit divisive, but I know a lot of people enjoy this fragrance, and throughout summer I actually also enjoy this scent. It's a perfectly unisex fragrance. You can alternatively go with Club de Nuit Milestone from Armaf as well, which is pretty similar scent-wise to this one. But I think Hamidi Addicted Imperial is a slightly better deal because you get a 120 milliliter bottle size. And I just enjoy the scent profile in here just a little bit more compared to the Armaf fragrance. The next one featured today comes from the house of Zimaya, which is yet another sub-brand of Afnan, and the fragrance itself is called Ghyoom. And this fragrance is a very interesting take on the Orthoporesis Megamare DNA. It has a bit of a twist, a bit of a fruity twist, but also carries quite a lot of the DNA of Megamare. Now, I have to be, you know, fully honest with you, and that original DNA has never been one of my personal favorites. But here, you know, Zimaya and Afnan have done an interesting twist, adding some fruity sweetness to the original DNA. Works pretty well in warm weather, in the warmer months of the year. Has a very decent performance, in fact quite good. Comes nicely packaged. I really like the bottle design of this fragrance, and carries a very low price tag, at least around here in Europe. The next one that I'm going to show you comes again from the house of Lattafa, and it's called part of their Glacier line, and it's called Glacier Bolt. This one is a clone, or more like a twist, of fragrance that's heavily inspired by Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Beau. That Le Beau line. To me, it stands somewhere in between the original EDT and the Parfum versions. You get that very tropical, you know, scent profile that's super sweet, super fruity. Has almost like a sun cream type of vibes out of this fragrance. It's quite sweet. You need to like sweet fragrances in order to enjoy this one, but it's a pretty good, decent and cheap alternative for the original fragrances. Performance is decent. Price tag is usually pretty low, around about the 20 something euro mark. I'm not a huge fan of the original scents either, but I find Glacier Bolt to actually be a little bit more wearable even compared to the original scents. The next one that I'm going to show you is yet another fragrance that brings sort of a strong tropical vibes. It comes from the house of Fragrance World and their Allure sub-brand, and it's called Raiee Lil Nisa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right, it's quite a mouthful, but this is a very interesting fragrance. This is supposedly a clone of Tamim's Blue Heart. I've never tried the original fragrance, but this one, as I said, smells very tropical. You get quite a lot of saffron and a lot of sweet coconut note in this fragrance. That's pretty much the backbone of it. You get a lot of ambery sweetness, a lot of vanilla sweetness, some tonka bean, quite a lot of musks as well. Smells very, very sort of unsummery, very tropically. You know, a very tropical vibe, carries a very tropical vibe. Unisex fragrance that leans a little bit to the feminine side in my opinion, but still nonetheless is a very, very nice, light and easy to wear fragrance that works great in the warmer months, and it's pretty cheap. The next one is from the house of Missoni, and it's called Missoni Wave, a pretty sort of a well-known fragrance in the community. You get a magnetic cap, and this fragrance to my nose smells like you know, a mix between Versace Per Homme and Allure Homme Sport from Chanel. Again, a very likable, very easy to wear fragrance that has lots of citruses, lots of freshness, some marine notes, some musk and ouds on the dry down. Performance here is about average, maybe slightly above average, but that's to be expected because of the scent profile. The next one that I'm going to show you comes from the house of Hadlage, and it's one of my latest discovery, and the fragrance itself is called Shiaka Blue. And this fragrance is a very, very interesting mashup of a few different DNAs. The opening here is very strongly reminiscent of Blue de Chanel. You get that citrusy, slightly woody you know, opening, but then after a few minutes, like 5 or 10 minutes, this starts to become really sweet and go into the direction of Scandal Per Homme from Jean-Paul Gaultier. You start to get quite a lot of sweetness, you know, and that lasts for about hour and a half, and then after that it takes another direction and becomes something really bluish, something with a very strong shower jelly vibe. A very interesting scent profile. So far from my testing, seems to be having a great performance actually, especially considering the scent profile. Very likable, very easy to wear, and very versatile fragrance with a very low price tag. The next one that I'm going to show you comes from the house of Afnan, and it's called Turati Blue. A very, very good clone of Bvlgari's Tygar. You get that very versatile, very likable scent profile that has lots of citruses, a very sweet grapefruity, juicy grapefruity note in the opening of this fragrance, some spices, some oud, some musk on the dry down. I really, really like Turati Blue. In my experience, this fragrance has been a great performer, again considering the scent profile, which is not that dark or sweet. It has a very high complement factor. It has super versatile, you know, scent DNA. Very easy to wear, very easy to like, and all in all, a fantastic fragrance and a great clone of Tygar. And the last fragrance that I'm going to show you today is pretty similar to the previous one, although this carries a little bit of a different DNA. It comes from the house of Afnan, from the house of Al Haramain, excuse me, and it's called Junon Oud. This fragrance is something that's very close to Bvlgari's Tygar, but it's closer to Suspiro's Vibrato. The original scents, in my opinion, are pretty close to each other, and the previous one that I showed you, Turati Blue from Afnan and Junon Oud from Al Haramain, are also pretty close to each other. Although, you know, Vibrato compared to Tygar and Junon Oud compared to Turati Blue, both of them are a little bit darker, a little bit more woody. But nonetheless, both of them are pretty similar and are fantastic scents. Junon Oud, so far from my testing kits, also seemed to be a great performer, especially when it comes to projection. This thing seems to project really nicely for 2.5 up to 3 hours, which in my opinion is a fantastic performance for this scent profile. The last fragrance featured in today's video from Al Haramain, Junon Oud. So guys, in today's video I tried to quickly show you a total of 20 fragrances that in my opinion were great in the summertime. I hope that you found this video interesting. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.